Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Let's start with some Churchill. If you're going through hell, keep going. Never, never, never give up. Currently, Ukraine is going through hell, but they have no other option. They have to keep going. In today's video, I've got some good news for Ukraine, but I've also got some bad news. I'm going to be completely honest about the current state of the war. But first, I want to show you guys this spectacle. Putin flies to the UAE with Su-35 fighter escorts, a quartet of Su-35s, all armed with air-to-air missiles, flanked Putin's Ilyushin-96 as it made its way to Abu Dhabi. So to get to the UAE from Russia, Putin just had to fly over the Caspian Sea, Iran, which is a friendly country, and then the Persian Gulf. And this is how he was greeted. Russian flags lining the road leading to the presidential palace, fighter jets, probably American-made, showing the Russian flag in the sky. I've actually been to the presidential palace in Abu Dhabi before, and it's a pretty cool place, but don't pay attention to all these pro-Russian symbols. Just last year in Dubai, the Burj Khalifa was lit up in Ukraine's colors as well. So this is just the Emiratis trying to be hospitable. And even though Putin is just landing at the airport, he felt it necessary to wear a bulletproof vest. Normally you would wear a bulletproof vest in a war zone, but Putin's a little jumpy and feels like he needs to wear it getting off his own plane. And Putin immediately met with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. And this is what we need to talk about, because this is pretty fascinating. After the UAE, Putin is going to go to Saudi Arabia next. Neither the UAE or Saudi Arabia is a signatory to the Rome Statute, so they're not compelled under international law to arrest Putin and turn him over to The Hague. So there's some tension between Russia and Saudi Arabia. Judging by the statements of the Saudi officials prior to Putin's visits, Arab oil-producing countries are dissatisfied and even annoyed with Russia's attitude as a member of the OPEC Plus alliance. The observers' main complaint was the lack of transparency of information on the Russian side, especially regarding data on oil exports. So OPEC is the global cartel for oil, the organization of petroleum exporting countries. And here's the map showing OPEC and the OPEC Plus alliance, including Russia. But there's three important countries not part of the OPEC cartel: Brazil, the United States, and Canada. And this is what has Saudi Arabia concerned. This is the price of oil, ICE Brent crude, over the last 2 years. If we go back to February of 2022, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the price of oil spiked to $127 a barrel. It then sort of came back down, but because of inflation and global demand for energy, oil was pretty bad last summer, the summer of 2022. Russia and all oil-producing nations were getting a really good price on oil. It then came down as central banks raised interest rates, killing global demand for energy. It then looked like it was recovering over the summer this year, 2023, but when we zoom into the last 6 months, it's basically cratering, down to $74 a barrel. Now, Russia trades its own price, the Urals price, but check it out. Putin was getting around $83 a barrel back in September, and now it's down to $56 and falling. Why is this? Why is the global price for all oil currently cratering? And it's because of record U.S. oil output, which is challenging OPEC. So here's the bar chart showing barrels per day produced by the United States. It's been steadily growing since 2022. tremendous demand in the North American market as well as Europe for the United States and Canada to export as much oil and natural gas as possible. So that's short-term what's been driving the output production, but it's also just the free market. Here in the United States, the government doesn't control the oil supply. Sure, there's some regulation, but the fair market value determines if private or publicly traded oil companies want to produce more themselves. So here's a fascinating clip from CNBC that I saw yesterday. U.S. oil production is a real problem for OPEC, says top energy analyst Paul Sankey. So let's watch 30 seconds of this clip and then talk about what this means for the war in Ukraine.
It was strange because this proposed cut wasn't mentioned in the final communique, and then some other countries independently come out with their own plans for cuts. I mean, that's sort of what was not convincing about what they wanted to telegraph to the markets.
Yeah, it wasn't convincing. I mean, it's already a problem when OPEC's cutting, and they've already cut.
So over the last year, OPEC and Saudi Arabia have been cutting production in order to drive up the price. Saudi Arabia wants about 80, 90, or 100 US dollars per barrel. But that's not what's been happening.
And as you say, they've got a huge problem with US production levels. I mean, it's extraordinary. And what you've got to remember is the US industry is planning on 60, and they're delivering this, 13, 14 million barrel a day type number, which is just...
So US oil producers are comfortable if the price of oil per barrel is as low as 60. It's still profitable to pump and export at 60.
It's incredible. So it's a real problem for OPEC. And if you look around the world, Guyana, there's maybe some concerns there at the moment, but basically Guyana, Canada, Brazil, which was part of the OPEC conversation today, are all delivering growth. We're only 2 or 3 years from, $40 oil in 2020, negative oil in the US, and yet we're seeing this just extraordinary performance from the industry. And it's a problem for OPEC.
So if OPEC cannot bolster this price or put a floor there, what is the floor in your view?
That they flood the market. I mean, we've more or less been saying potentially Saudi needs to just flush this thing out. And in that case, Saudi would then take some of its spare capacity. Most people think Saudi capacity is around 11 million a day, 11.5 million a day barrels. They're doing about 9 at the moment. So they could just add 2.5 million barrels into the market for 6 months and just flush it.
Saudi Arabia has the capability to flood the market with oil. Why would they do this? And this is OPEC's weapon. If countries not part of the cartel start producing a large quantity, driving down their profit margins, then Saudi Arabia has a nuclear option where they flood the markets with oil until everyone else goes bankrupt. And Saudi Arabia previously did this. So here's, once again, the price of crude oil going all the way back to 2009. And between 2010 and 2014, oil globally was about $100 or $110 per barrel. Saudi Arabia was unhappy with the shale production levels here in the United States. The way that it's called fracking or shale oil production works is lots of small independent companies striking up their own wells in the Permian Basin, and they don't have a lot of capital, they don't have a lot of funds, and if it's not profitable to pump, they can go bankrupt really fast. So what Saudi Arabia did in 2014 was flood the market with oil, bringing the price per barrel down to 37, to deliberately bankrupt these small independent oil wells fracking here in the United States. It wiped out hundreds of companies. Saudi Arabia did this deliberately. The price of oil then somewhat recovered, but not reliably back to these 2010, 11, 12 levels. Saudi Arabia has a huge problem with US oil production, and they're contemplating doing this again, flooding the market to bankrupt American oil producers. This is a dispute between the United States and Saudi Arabia. But Russia is caught in the middle. This is why Putin is flying to the Persian Gulf. If Saudi Arabia makes this decision, and you can see Mohammed bin Salman meeting with Putin, MBS has the power to destroy Russia if they flood the markets with oil, bringing the price down to $37 a barrel. Russia's Urals wouldn't even get 25. And if Saudi Arabia held that for 6 months, good night, Russia. You're not coming back from this. Interesting development. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but this is the real reason why Putin flew to the Persian Gulf. He's trying to placate or appease or sweet talk the Saudis to not go nuclear on U.S. oil production. So let's stay tuned to that over the next couple months. But Ukraine knows what they have to do. They know they have to go after Russia's revenue streams. Ukraine hits strategic Russian oil depot in Crimea, along with those 2 rail lines going to China that were taken out last week. It's open season. Pipelines and rail lines and depots, maybe even tankers eventually. Ukraine has to go for all of it until Russia collapses or gives up on this war and goes back to their own country. Ukrainian retailers face big losses, disruptions due to Polish border blockade. I've not really talked about this here on the channel because I don't know the internal politics of Poland. I find this unfathomable that the Polish government would allow truckers to blockade the Ukrainian border. These trucks trying to get into Ukraine are carrying food, they're carrying medical supplies, they're carrying tourniquets, things that the Ukrainian military desperately needs. So this has been a huge problem the last couple weeks, but perhaps Ukraine has found a pretty ingenious way around the blockade. Here's a pretty cool video showing a train loaded up with trucks going across the border. I don't know at what scale Ukraine can achieve this, but it appears these Polish truckers have not blocked the rail lines. And I'm not certain that Russia isn't behind this. I think Russia has been funding and promoting agitators in Slovakia, Hungary, and Poland to, once again, go after Ukraine's economy and weaken them as much as possible. Two can play that game, and I guarantee you 2024 is not going to be a good year for Russia's economy. Another piece of good news, President Biden announces the new security assistance package for Ukraine, worth $175 million. The usual stuff, HIMARS ammunition, artillery shells, and Javelin anti-tank weapons. So let's now get to the bad news. Secretary Blinken announces one of the last defense aid packages unless Congress passes further funding for Ukraine. So the money allocated by Congress last year is almost entirely gone. This aid package was $175 million. Realistically, the United States can only do one more from this pool of money unless Congress adds more money. So this is where it's going to get alarming. Putin could prevail. White House issues dire warning over Ukraine aid. Fears are growing in Washington that Putin may be content to sit out the situation until next year's U.S. presidential election, a probable replay of 2020's contest between Biden and Trump. As an American, I apologize to the world that, yes, more than likely it's going to be Biden and Trump again. So this week was supposed to be the week that the Senate voted on an aid package for Ukraine, but also maybe Taiwan, Israel, and some stuff about border security. That vote fell through. President Zelensky canceled his address to the U.S. Senate as Senate Republicans have rallied against the aid package. I'm incredibly distraught to see this, but this is the Republican Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who up until this point has been very supportive of Ukraine, doing a 180. So I'm going to share this clip with you.
Nobody on the Republican side in the Senate has been more enthusiastically supporting the idea of a comprehensive supplemental that deals with Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. We want that to pass. But while we're talking about borders, my advice to the majority leader last week was, if you don't believe how serious we are about this, then file cloture. And so I'm advocating, and I hope all of our members vote no on the motion to proceed to the shell.
This is Republican Senator Mitch McConnell knifing Ukraine in the back. I don't know what changed in the last week, where Senate Republicans are now talking like House Republicans. This is very concerning. So, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell will not allow a straight up or down vote on aid for Ukraine. He's joining the House Republicans saying it has to be tied to immigration reform. And it's all the Republican senators now. Republican Senator Mitt Romney is saying the exact same thing. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham is also now saying the exact same thing. And I'm going to take a moment to just highlight Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who has the backbone of a jellyfish, because here he is 6 months ago in Kyiv, sitting down at a table meeting with President Zelensky, and this is what he told the Ukrainians.
We have total support, it's about 38 billion, and it's big support, very important.
The best money we've ever spent.
Thank you so much.
Now it's
So this 6 months ago is Senator Graham saying military aid to Ukraine is the best money the United States has ever spent. And I agree with him. For a fraction of our defense budgets, we can cripple our major military geopolitical rival, the Russians. We are destroying their Soviet-era stockpiles of weapons and armor and equipment for pennies compared to what we spend on our military every single year. And because of these statements from Senator Graham, Russia issued an arrest warrant for Lindsey Graham. The Russians want to arrest Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, and Lindsey Graham now is willing to sell out Ukraine to argue about immigration reform. President Biden is doing what he can. He's urging Congress to approve aid and slamming Republicans over their inaction. President Biden yesterday held a press conference in the White House, and I'll share a little bit of what he said to reporters.
Russian forces are committing war crimes. It's as simple as that. Who is prepared to walk away from holding Putin accountable for this behavior? Who among us is really prepared to do that? You know, for the better part of 2 years, the brave people of Ukraine have denied Russia a victory on the battlefield. They've defeated Vladimir Putin's ambition to dominate Ukraine. And the people of the United States can and should take pride. They should take pride that we've enabled Ukraine's success thanks to the steady supply of weapons and ammunition. We provided them together with our partners and our allies. I just did a meeting with the G7, which was one of the issues we discussed. All the European leaders. We are prepared to stay with us, stay with Ukraine. And our European friends are as well. Who in the United States is prepared to walk away from that?
Apparently, the entire Republican Party is willing to walk away from that. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you guys about U.S. politics and what is currently happening. This is a setup. This is a setup from Republicans for aid to Ukraine to fail. And the problem at the southern border, I'm in favor of more border security. It's been a problem for 40 years, my entire life. I am in favor of immigration reform. I don't think people who come here illegally should be allowed to stay. This is a complicated issue. It's been a problem for 40 years. And there's no way that Republicans want President Biden to solve this problem while he's president and he's up for re-election for another 4 years. So think about it. The dream scenario. Republicans make a list of demands to secure the border and reform immigration. And President Biden accepts all of them. And we get this magical deal in the next month. Aid for Ukraine, and we solve immigration. The first president to do it in 40 years. The border is locked down. President Biden gets to have a grand signing ceremony, and for the next 10 months, he gets to tell the American people during his re-election, I'm the guy who did it. More than likely, it's going to be Trump versus Biden, and if immigration is solved, if the border is secure, if Republicans get everything they want, then what the heck is Trump going to be campaigning about? Biden is going to say, I, the Democrat, am the only one capable of getting things done. Trump was president for 4 years. He couldn't secure the border. He couldn't reform immigration. If you care about these issues, vote for me, Joe Biden, and the Democrats. That's honest politics. That's how things work in America. So this is a setup. This is a setup from the Republicans for military aid to Ukraine to fail. All of these senators know this. Mitch McConnell, Senator Romney, Lindsey Graham. They know exactly what they're doing. They're lying to you, especially if you're a voter who cares about border security and immigration policy. They're using Ukraine as a political tool and cover, saying, we want to support Ukraine, but we can't secure the border and we can't get immigration reform. It's those evil Democrats. It's President Biden's fault. Don't blame us for not supporting Ukraine. It's the Democrats' fault. When in reality, they would never give President Biden this political victory in a re-election year. It's a setup. And at the same time, this liar and hypocrite, Speaker Johnson, is still happy to meet with European leaders and the Ukrainian delegation. This is the Ukrainian Defense Minister Umerov. Ukraine, of course, is still going to meet with whoever they can to plead their case. Speaker Johnson doesn't care. He's willing to let all these people die, as long as he gets to stay in power and the Republicans win big in November. If that was too brutal, if that was too honest for you guys, I know I'm going to get people who will dislike this video and unsubscribe from my channel for speaking the truth, but I'm going to tell you what's really going on here. This is immoral. This is unconscionable. This is not acceptable. And this is what's at stake. Here is a Russian army general on Kremlin State TV being honest about their war ambition. We definitely need Mykolaiv and Odessa regions. This is mandatory in order to discourage NATO and the West from accepting Ukraine into NATO. So when we look at the map, the Russians are stating, they've never said anything otherwise, that they want the complete territorial boundaries of Donetsk, meaning they're going to annex Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. They want the city of Zaporizhia. They want the city of Kherson. They want the city of Mykolaiv. They want the city of Odessa. They want the entire Black Sea coast, and they want to link up with their forces in Transnistria so they can also take Moldova. Zaporizhia is over 700,000 Ukrainian citizens. Kherson is almost 300,000. Mykolaiv is 500,000. Odessa is 1 million Ukrainian people. The Russian military is going to continue bombing and destroying these cities and killing these people for as long as it takes to get the bare minimum. That's what they're calling the minimum before they would ever agree to a ceasefire or peace talks or an end to hostilities. It's not the time for political games. Likewise, Venezuela just held a referendum and annexed their neighbor, Guyana. If Republicans want to show weakness for our military, weakness in front of our allies around the world, this is the response we're going to get. Dictators all over the world are seizing upon this opportunity to attack their smaller neighbors, to expand their borders, to steal their resources. The international rules that have been in place since World War II are now out the window, and we're back in the age of empires. You got to get big before someone bigger than you attacks you and takes your stuff. That is the world we're heading towards if the Republican Party here in the United States sticks to this course of action. There is one final hope for military aid to Ukraine passing this year, and that final hope is AIPAC, the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee. This is Israel's lobbyist organization in Washington, D.C. They give a lot of money to the Republican Party. They also give a lot of money to the Democrats. Giving money to everyone is how you always guarantee you get what you want. And Israel really wants and needs additional military assistance in their war against Hamas. And if the Republican Party wants to tie an unsolvable problem, immigration reform, to aid to Israel, well, this is going to upset AIPAC. And hopefully they're making phone calls right now. But if the Republican Party wants to stick to this suicidal path, then maybe next year during the 2024 election, AIPAC will only give money to and support Democrats. People willing to allow simple up or down votes to support militarily our allies around the world. I still think there is a sliver of hope. Perhaps Senate Republicans are bluffing. People like Romney and Graham and McConnell will back off this doomsday plan, and then at some point the week between Christmas and New Year's, actually allow a clean vote on military aid to our allies. If not, Ukraine is going to have to hold out for another 333 days. If the Republicans are going to abuse their power in the majority to backstab our allies and democracies around the world, this is the conversation we need to have for the next 333 days. And nobody in America should vote for a Republican, because if they have the power of the majority in the Senate or the House, the loonies in the minority, under the influence of Russian propaganda, are going to control the debates. They're going to sabotage aid to our democratic allies around the world. Now, this isn't the end. The United States, even if Congress doesn't allocate funds, can still do a lot. The United States can still provide intelligence and advice. They can still provide surveillance. They can still do a lot. And there is a pool of money called the Presidential Drawdown Authority. The use of the Presidential Drawdown Authority is a direct drawdown to provide military assistance under the Foreign Assistance Act. So Congress wrote a law where the president every year, at his discretion, has this pool of money he can do anything he wants with. It's not a very large pool of money. For the fiscal year 2024, the drawdown cap is going to be $7.8 billion. But this pool is for everyone. If Taiwan needs military assistance, if Israel needs military assistance, if Guyana needs military assistance, it's still something. The United States can still provide Gimler's rounds and artillery shells at a couple $100 million a month every month. But as far as the big stuff, like Patriot air defense systems or Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, the United States can't help in 2024 as long as Republicans block additional aid. So here's the truth. I don't think Ukraine can and should go on the offensive, perhaps for the entire year of 2024. The Europeans have been fantastic with financial and humanitarian aid, but as far as military aid, the United States has made up the majority. Unless Europe can get their act together and start magically producing millions of artillery shells every month, Ukraine doesn't have the resources to go on the offensive. They're going to have to hold for an entire year and hope something bad happens to Russia. Russia's pretty incompetent. I mean, their society has collapsed twice in the last 100 years, so if any country were to collapse, it would be Russia. But we're going to need some help. Ukraine is going to need some luck and some help, and for Russia to F this up. Final clips I have for you for today. The first one is a new monument to the hero of Ukraine, Alexander Matsievsky. This is the Ukrainian prisoner of war who the Russians on camera forced to dig his own grave, and then they executed him on camera. Here's the monument to this hero.
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Glory to the heroes. Final clip I have for you is the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in the capital city of Kyiv. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.